bushes that can never be duplicated, red-legged frogs, salamanders, etc. We also have orioles, the nests of orioles. It is a nature's treasure for the residents of Orchid. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat Perryman.
Hi, my name is Pat Perryman. George and I live at 845 Amethyst. In 1991, in the late summer, when we purchased our property from Mr. Boyson and Ron Edwards, we had the understanding that there would not be anything built behind us in the no-build zone, the corridor, the flight pattern. And you know what? I love kids. I love athletics. I worked in a high school for 27 years, and I worked with the coaches and the athletes for all those years. I want the kids to have a place to play. Maybe not in my backyard, for this reason. Planes come over. You all may not be aware of this, but as recently as a year and a half ago, a small plane crashed between Amethyst and Woodmere in that area, right where the soccer fields are going to be, okay? The dune scrub is really beautiful, and we do have a lot of animals in the area. Bradley is already congested. It's going to get much, much worse. Low-cost, high-density housing and the commercial retail isn't consistent with what we currently have in our area, and the home prices will go down considerably. I'm an old lady. I might even die before this ever takes place, but don't change from the original plan, please.
Robert L. Baker. Followed by Taylor Frias.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you for hearing all of us and your patience. Don't think I can add anything to what's been said. All of the points have been made. I just want to express that it is the concentration of air traffic. That's why they call it a airport approach, and it is probably hazardous to some extent. We were warned when we bought our house that it was on the airport approach, and it seems like an illogical place to locate high-density housing and kids playing on the fields and stuff like that. I'm representing a few more people that are not getting up to talk, save you some time maybe. So we just like to go on record as saying we think there's probably better places that you could locate this kind of activity and new housing and things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Taylor Frias, followed by George Adam.
My name is Taylor Frias, and I'm a freshman at Rigetti High School. I have played soccer for 10 years, and I hope to play in college. I have played in the Orchid United Soccer League, and I now play for Shreve Soccer Academy, which is part of the Santa Maria Independent Soccer Organization. We travel all over the state playing in tournaments, and our team is very competitive. Soccer has been a very good experience for me. I have learned that hard work pays off, and I have made a lot of friends from other schools. A big problem we have is that there aren't enough soccer fields in Santa Maria or Orchid. Some fields are very crowded or get flooded when it rains. Other fields aren't made for soccer and are in bad condition, which can be dangerous. Many other cities we go to have nice soccer fields, and I wonder why we can't have anything like that in our area. There are hundreds of kids playing soccer here. I hope we can build some fields before I go off to college, but even if we don't, we should still do it because it will benefit the community for many years. I hope the Planning Commission will carefully review the proposal to build the soccer fields. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Taylor. George Adam.
Hello, I'm George Adam at 5980 Impala Trail in Orchid, on the southern edge of Orchid. I've coached soccer in the area for probably 10 years and spent a great deal of time away from my management at work, and I think it's a very important part of development for kids to be able to attract quality individuals out of the community that will invest their time and make it as efficient as possible in the investment of that time, so that those philosophies and those values can be imparted on those athletes. I think that the soccer organization, is very well developed in this country, and it's extremely important that those values from that organization are imparted on the youth of this area. And a lot of the grandparents and parents invest a lot of time in driving all over the community. And this would make their time much more efficient. They'd make it to more games at a lot less loss of time, and it would help the traffic situation greatly. And I know there's a lot of concern as far as the density, and I think that should be as separated of an issue as possible. I know in this type of a project, you can't really separate that out, but it really should not sacrifice the project for the values that it would bring to the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vicky Chartier, followed by Stephen Reese.
Good afternoon. My name is Vicky Chartier. I reside at 4378 Ashley Place. My reasons for coming before you this afternoon are quite simple. I feel we may have raised a few eyebrows with the children coming in with us and possibly standing up here with me. However, I do feel that this is an important thing for them to witness, not only because this is something that I do support along with my family and the teammates that my children play with, but also to hear the other side of the fence. It's a learning opportunity for them that I don't think they will soon forget. Many of the points that I thought I was going to come up here to say have been stated already. I do feel that the environmental impact study for this program should not be a closed door at this point in time. There's a lot of things to be taken into consideration, and we won't know a lot of that if it's not allowed to proceed. So for as many reasons that people are not for this project, I would like you to please take into consideration a lot of the statements that were made. Lori brought up many good points about the value of what soccer and athletics brings to children. These children are our future. They can bring many more things and positive influences to our community. And for that, you can see that I have all sizes, and I do have one that comes right about here. It was her birthday this afternoon, and she was snatched away before we were able to speak before you. And as a parent of these 4 children, it does get difficult trying to go from school to school to school to see their games. And it would be a wonderful opportunity as a family to be able to enjoy watching them grow and become stronger, better athletes. Great for them to support their siblings and their friends. So before the door is closed on it, I would love for you to really consider the opportunity of looking into the environmental impact study for this program. And I thank you very much for allowing us the opportunity to stand before you.
Thank you. Could you give us their names for the record, please?
I would be happy to. Jonathan Chartier, Sarah Chartier, Laura Chartier, and their sister Brittany Chartier was here and did need to leave.
Thank you very much for coming and participating, kids.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Stephen Reese, followed by Scott Cathart. Stephen Reese, are you here?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Stephen Reese. I'm a 30-year Orcutt resident. We live at 1225 Woodmere Road, within 300 yards of the proposed Bradley Village project. I'm also a California licensed architect with 25 years experience. I'm a soccer referee, soccer coach, and most importantly, the parent of a 13-year-old daughter who is an honor student at Orcutt Junior High and has played soccer for 8 years in the Orcutt area. Today I'm here also representing the Orcutt United Soccer League. I'm currently the vice president. I've been on the board of directors for the Orcutt Soccer League for 6 years. And I want to speak to you on behalf of that league. What we need in this community is a soccer facility that's centrally located. This is an infill project. By an infill project, it means the supporting infrastructure already exists. I'd like to commend Mrs. Hunter for giving 60% of this property to soccer field, to recreational uses. That's unheard of. What we really need in this community is the central facility. If we go out of town and build something 8, 10, 12 miles out of town, the people won't be able to get there. The gasoline prices, this is central. It's in the middle of Orcutt. I implore you to look at the positives of this project, to build a facility that we can all be proud of, to create a legacy for the youth of the neighborhood and the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reese. Scott Carthart, followed by Rachel Jackson. Scott, see if Scott's back there. Okay. Rachel Jackson.
Hi, I'm Rachel Jackson. I am on the Havoc soccer team U13, and I go to Joe Nightingale School, and soccer is very important to me. The glass is half full for me all the time, but why not let it be overflowing with a soccer field? I mean, what could be more fun than having a soccer field where we can relax and have fun? And I'm testing right now, and that is really hard. And there's nothing better than to go onto a soccer field and just let it loose, just play, and it just feels so great. It's kind of like a therapy field. I mean, it's not just a bunch of grass with white lines. It's like the Mecca for me. It's like my Mecca. So, and childhood obesity, that bugs me. Okay, that soccer field, that could support so much exercise for this community, and my generation is in need of some exercise, let me tell you. This, words cannot express how much this is important to me and to my friends. This community is linked to soccer in almost every way. So, and this, it's, yeah.
That's right. Take your time, Rachel.
Okay,
You know, we think it takes a lot of courage for a young kid to come up your age. We're very proud of you that you come up and tell us what you feel.
The habitat enclosure is great too, because I'm kind of a tree hugger, and I like the animals too, and they get a place to live and stuff, and we're not killing them off or anything, and the people can come and see them, and why not see us kick butt playing soccer too, as well as looking at the beautiful animals. So that's all I can say.
Thank you very much, Jill. Thank you for coming. Jill Miskowitz. Jill? I know her dad spoke before, so Jill, there she is. And Jill is our last speaker.
Hi, I've been
Hi.
back there listening to the testimony of many different people with many different ideas about what we need in this community. And I know I get to work with 50 fantastic little girls. You've heard from some of them today, and I'm very proud of them. And you know, soccer really gives them so much more than they can get from school. It adds to the values that they get at home. And we don't have, I had to cancel 2 practices in the last 2 weeks because I had nowhere to go. We had nowhere to take our girls to play because we're competing with softball, baseball, basketball. And you know, all these girls want to do is have a place to let their hair down and let loose and stretch their legs and get away from the Nintendo machine, the TV, and all these things that we're encouraging them to do. There's nowhere to go. And all I'm hearing from the opposition is not in my backyard. And I like the lady that came up and said, you know, I'm not in my backyard, but not in my backyard. Well, you know, it's got to be in somebody's backyard. And you know, I can't think of a better gift than the 50-plus acres that Lenny Hunter is giving to this community. That's a fabulous gift. I don't know anybody else out there who's willing to give it to us, because you know what? We can go and develop that property too. She's the only one who's offering to give this land to the kids. It's a fabulous gift. And we're asking from you is not anything but just to let it go through the review process. Let us have public hearings. It deserves that. And that's all I have to say on the project.
Thank you very much, Jill.
Thank you.
All right, this is going to be a time for rebuttal by the applicant, but before we do that, we're going to take a much-needed break. We're going to take a break. That's all right. Planning Commission will come back to order. Thank you very much. We had one more speaker, George Pierce. Is Mr. Pierce here? Mr. George?
Thank you, Madam. Madam Chairman. I'm sorry about that.
You have 1 minute.
George Pierce again, a longtime Orchid resident. I think longer than any of them I've heard today, 44 years. I want to clear up a couple of things, misconceptions that I heard here today. The Orchid plan didn't take 2 years, it took 10 years and cost several $1 million. And I don't think we should be changing things in the Orchid plan that cost that much and took that much time of everybody easily. I'd like to give you a little bit of history on this piece of property. The previous owner, Randy Wheeler, from McCladden Development, who got Rice Ranch approved, and Olga Howard, the previous president of the Orchid Area Advisory Group, and I met with John Zorowitz to discuss this property. And at that time, we were discussing the library on one corner on Bradley and the community center on the other corner on Bradley. And the discussion was how many affordable senior units would you have to make this fly? 200. 200, not this massive amount of housing and commercial and everything that they're asking you to rezone it to. He could make it fly for 200 units. It's presently zoned for 1 unit. This is a get-rich-quick scheme. And they're using the soccer people. I hate to bust their bubble, but the recreation that's allowed on there is passive recreation. That's trails. So I urge you to take these things into consideration.
All right, thank you very much. And that concludes the testimony at this time. I want to acknowledge that we also received about 30 letters here from various people, some of them who spoke today, emphasizing their position. And in addition to that, the staff, I counted the letters in the staff document. I think I counted 360-some letters, all in favor of the project. And there were a few that were opposed to the project, but then there were about 7 or 8 pages of signatures supporting the project, and each page had about 22, so there were several hundred names supporting the project. All right, bringing it back, we'll bring it back to the applicant for rebuttal of the comments. Ms. Hunter?
Thank you so much. I'll make this very brief. First of all, I'd like to call your attention to the letter from the airport district. And I'd like the people in the audience to be aware of that. I have met with the airport district, and they did submit a letter that said that there is a height restriction, which I don't think it says in the letter, but they told me it's 45 feet. We would never build 45 feet in this particular height. But the airport did go on record as saying, please initiate the process so that they can look over what comes out of it. And actually, they were very supportive of the soccer fields. So that may clear up some of the airport issue. The second thing is there's been quite a few flyers that were handed out by the opposition saying that I was proposing to build 500 affordable houses. And of course, that's not true. I know you can multiply the zoning here by the size of the acreage, and you'll find that, in fact, if this was built to a maximum of what is being requested, and realistically, most projects aren't allowed to do that, it would be about 300. So I would just urge you to go forward, let us get into all the review, and at that time, we certainly will hold all the public comment period, invite all the residents back, but I'm really confident that we can develop a project that will be really a complement to the community, and I'm very committed to do that. I'd like to ask Gonzo Garcia to answer a couple of quick questions that were asked about the soccer. Gonzo?
Gonzalo Garcia again. Thank you. One of the things that I think has kind of been overlooked is the fact that, really the county and no other entity has stepped up. We've heard people saying now this should be a park and all this other stuff, but nobody's stepped up. Nobody's stepped up with the resources or the space necessary to make this happen. We have a benefactor now who's willing to step up and make this happen. The other thing is there's going back to your question, Mr. Boyson, was about the numbers of people. We anticipate kind of a peak number would be about 1,000 people on site. That is only seasonal. There's a recreational season, September through November, that this would be the peak on Saturdays only. We would see a much higher use. During the week, you'd have practicing out there, but not, huge influx of people. The other thing is during the rest of the year, 3/4 of the year, really only these upper fields up here, because there's going to be multiple levels, only these upper fields would be in use by the club organizations, the competitive players that play year round. The other important factor is the question of parking. This is all parking in here. This is all parking in here. This is parking all the way down in here, and this is bus parking over here. We have a single access point for the entire site to control the influx that will be gated. So the security questions get addressed through a gated closure here that will be closed every night. It's not our goal to be a burden on the community. It's our goal to be an enhancement and a benefit to the youth of this community in perpetuity through this type of park. Really, those are the key points that I wanted to
Is there a ballpark figure on parking now of roughly what do you estimate? Have an estimate?
Is it 500? I was going to say 400, but 500.
500, can I have the light?
Okay, there's 500 identified in this
And if
area
it-
and down this area as well.
And if it was determined that you needed more parking, you could probably expand to that area right there.
Well,
Right.
I think that's probably adequate. The calculations I've run, I was just kind of caught cold. We're actually indicate that for about 1,000 people, you need somewhere around 360 to 400 parking spots. So 500 parking spots, I think, adequately addresses the concern. We have been working with Urban Planning Concepts and Lanay for some time to try and design something conceptually that meets the need.
But if you had, this is getting too deep in it quick, and I don't
Right.
want, but if you had 6 or 7 games going, and the games ended, and now they're gonna shift cars, the traffic would be too much, so you gotta stagger the games, right? Stagger the games starting every,
Yeah,
maybe
and-
half an hour or every 20 minutes, so they wouldn't leave at the same, so,
Yeah, and as you have different age groups, they play different durations of games, so not every game's going to start at 9:30 in the
at
morning. So
9:30,
you'll have different
yeah.
times throughout the day.
right, all right, thank
Thank
you.
Lene asked me to make a couple of closing comments, and then we look forward to your deliberation. The interesting thing about the Orchid Community Plan and even this plan, these are basically bubble maps. And what we're ready to do is move forward with the next step, which is let's start laying out some houses on here. Let's start laying out the park plan. Let's start laying out how this is going to work and actually see how this is going to go through the environmental review process. If we don't start now, it just means that through the housing EIR, we'll wait through another cycle of time. It's really, we think it's very valuable to move forward with the concept plans beyond just the bubble maps that you see here. And we may find that it only works with so many units. But right now, everybody's doing the math straight on the ultimate calculation of density. And we'd really like to move forward with this process and come up with some ideas. I think it's really important for the community to know, and particularly those along Woodmere and Amethyst, there were multiple opportunities for the whole site to go into open space, and the community let those opportunities pass. And it's a reality that really needs to be fixed. When people are meeting with developers and missing opportunities to assure that land is dedicated for open space, other opportunities come forward. And today we have an opportunity to do half of this site as a park, half of this for development. And that's what's before us today. The EIR will look at the current designation of the site as one of the options, but other options will outline and will play into this process. So we're really hoping that we will continue to work with planning and development with the housing element, because that's what they've already been directed to do. And we're also hoping that you'll encourage us to move forward with processing a project that could be seen sooner than later.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm
does that
available for any comments.
All right. Commissioner Montgomery.
This is sort of a hybrid between a formal application and sort of a pre-app and a conceptual review. Nothing can legally stop you from going forward with the process, working with P&D. Maybe you won't get their total support, but under the law, there's a point at which you can simply say, we have...
Actually, no, that's why we're here today.
You can appeal.
We could appeal to the board, yes.
That's what I meant.
Mm-hmm.
So independently of this, you could go for it. I wondered whether economics, obviously, and feasibility are very important. There's only so much an applicant can do and give away and make a project work for him or her. Mr. Pierce had a suggestion. It sounded to me as like you might be 100 units apart. Are there any merits to his thoughts, forgetting what would the recreational use would be on the open space? But is there some room to maneuver?
To tell you the truth, yes. The whole process that we go through with environmental review is to look at alternatives. There's usually in the document a high alternative, a low alternative, the project applicant submitted project. And so the opportunities are there to look at all of the other community ideas, the library, community centers, the parks, the trails, the senior housing versus other housing, and you'll probably see a range of proposals brought forward. This is one option right here. This is actually, I think one person earlier said something about, well, the first thing they saw was something at about 178 units. Well, that was the first proposal we brought forward, except working with staff, they said, no, we want to see it come in consistent with what the housing element's talking about with the DR20 designation. So at least when the first project is going forward in process, it's consistent with what they've already been directed to do in the housing element. So we have a whole spectrum that we can work with in this process. So I did want to clarify that one point from a previous comment.
Is it possible that you might end up with DR12 or DR16 or something like that? DR20 is not mandatory at this point, is it?
We were instructed to work with the housing element group. That's what we've done. We actually had one that showed DR8 and DR12 on the site. And so we are in a spectrum of working with the staff, the EIR, the community, to look at all of the resources on the site. We just basically need your support to move forward with the process. And again, not negating the housing element issues, which are very legitimate.
And I suspect the EIR is really going to shed a lot of light on what's going to happen here.
And Lene's prepared to move forward with the architectural site plans, the layouts, but unless we have some direction to at least move forward, we're still talking about bubbles. And, in the end, it might not get approved, but at least we want to get moving forward with some concepts.
You had a third option, which I like, and that option was that you proceed with a project and pay for the entire EIR whereas the county was going to pick up on the other options that are presented by the staff. The county was going to pick up a portion of the EIR. And I find it, troubling that the county would be paying for that EIR. I think that,
Well, if I may respond, I
Yes.
think the staff report referred to the housing element EIR would continue, and that there might be a little mini EIR attached to that for our project to look at
Right.
the other amenities.
yeah,
That's a fine option, but it gets caught up in the whole global
That's right.
housing issue. We would like to run in compendium with the housing element, but have our own legs to walk on within our own
and your
individual
own EIR,
EIR.
which addresses only your issues and so
Right.
on.
Exactly.
All right, yeah, and I think I'm in favor of that type of thing. Thank you
Okay.
very much. Oh, wait a minute, there's another question. Commissioner Montgomery.
Just for clarification, so the housing element implementation, site selection, would go forward independently?
Yes, with the other 62
Right,
acres
okay,
or
fine.
whatever those other
All
sites
right.
are.
Why don't you, and I think you're suggesting this, but why not in the alternative, rather than coming forward with max, assuming DR 20, come in with the project that you were thinking of anyway? So that if the 20, if the sites aren't selected, at least, I now understand why you want a double process. Oh, okay,
And that's exactly what you're referring to. We would like to,
right.
we'd like to start really spending some serious money on design work. But if it's no process at all, then we'll just sit on the sidelines for a year or two and wait for the housing element issues to, but that's not going to provide the meat of this process if we don't get in some kind of initiation.
All right, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. And I'll bring it back to staff now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple things that I'd like to bring to the Commission's attention. First, the term staff has been used a number of times through the discussion this afternoon. The times when the applicant has been referring to staff talking about increasing the density and stuff, they have been referring to the comprehensive planning staff, not development review. I think our position is pretty clear from the memo that we provided last time and this time that we believe that this project is inconsistent with the Orchid Community Plan, and the option that we offered to allow it to go forward would be tying it to the affordable housing EIR. And I think I described it last time, but in case I didn't, we had a similar process with the Orchid Community Plan where there were a number of developers that had key sites that wanted to get an enhanced environmental review of their site instead of just kind of a broad brush. And so they opted to pay extra to have their site analyzed for specifics, for a specific density or a type of project, whether it's commercial or residential. And that has been, when we talk about option number one, including this project so it could piggyback along with the affordable housing EIR, that was what we had intended, that the applicant here would be paying an additional amount to allow their project to have a higher level of review than might have been just looked at numerically, just saying the DR 20 times the number of acres. That was what we had put down as the secondary option. But going as a separate standalone, that has been something that was floated by the applicant today and is not something that staff is recommending.
Looking at the two options that you submitted, or the staff report, and the one that the applicant submitted, I think I like the applicant's submittal better, and then option number one second. And I'd like to hear from my fellow commissioners. This is a 4th District item, so Commissioner Boyson.
Yep, and Mr. Chair, maybe I can kick this off. And by way of disclosure for my fellow commissioners, 16 or 17 years ago, I bought a 5-acre plot of land over here and processed a map to subdivide it into 15 single-family homes. I've also built these 2 homes right in here. I didn't build all of these homes. It was a lot sale subdivision. I did build several of them. In any event, I give that as a way of disclosure, but I also give it by way of disclosure that I have a pretty good feel for this neighborhood. I spent a lot of time there. I sat out in my van trying to hustle lots during a real bad real estate market. And so I got to know the neighborhood as we developed these out and we built these houses. And I can even say that most of the people that bought one of my houses are still considered my friends. It's kind of interesting. So I really do feel that that this project is not consistent with the Orca Community Plan. I think that but by the same token, I think that the Orca Community Plan may have made a mistake by not having at least a suggestion that there is potential for development on this piece of property. I've talked to a lot of people. I talked to Lori Tamura, who was part of the Orca Community Plan. I talked to Richard Quant, who was on the Orca Community Plan. And I think the big fear back there was the airport flight zone and not quite knowing what to do with this property. But before the Orca Community Plan, there was always the idea that these corners may be developed in some way. And I'm not sure, and I guess what I'm saying is that I don't think that you can take an 80-acre piece of property, infill property in the middle of an urban area and not expect some sort of development. But having said that, I think that this is just a little bit over the top. I think that but I think there is a project in here. And I'm not sure, I think I'm losing I can't see this. Is there another pointer? Oh yeah, that's better. I think that a soccer complex over here in this corner away from any of the existing residential neighborhoods may make sense, with more passive recreation as a buffer between that and the development would probably make sense. I realize that's not going to give them 12. I was very happy to see this expansion here, but just something along in this area. When I start hearing things like this is for bus parking, that's not this neighborhood. This is a community. These are all single-family houses, and the Woodmere project goes down to about here. Those are probably 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 square foot lots. But the rest of these 10,000 square foot lots and above, 10,000 square foot lots all along here. I think that this is a pretty good transition in here. This DR4 zoning for this corner area, I think that makes some sense. I think we should let the comprehensive planning go through with their study, their environmental study, to see even if this project is even warrants consideration in the new. But even if they do come back and say that this may be a site that we want to consider, I still think that we're going to have to look at putting some sort of a buffer between these existing single-family residents along here and any high density that is proposed. My idea would be some sort, I don't know whether you do cul-de-sacs or you do a strip of larger lot single-family homes in here with more of the multifamily here in the middle. I wouldn't want to see any of the commercial bordering the existing single-family residences. I think those go out here. And my concern here is that these people didn't buy off on this sort of a development. But if somebody comes in here and they buy these homes and they know it's going to be next to a commercial, I mean that's their concern. They're going into it with their eyes wide open. But I just feel that we're, if we're going to throw, Mr. Garcia estimated this to be 1,000 kids potentially on a Saturday morning. If you go out into these neighborhoods, this is a quiet community out here. I mean, this is, and this really embodies the real spirit of an Orchid community. These houses out here, I mean, they're individual, hardworking folks that are living the Orchid dream in these, and to subject them to this real intense recreation right next door, I think we're really doing a disservice, and we're really getting away from this Orchid community plan. So I guess in summary, three things. I'd like to see some sort of, if we do go forward with the plan, some sort of single-family resident component buffering the higher density. I would like to see no commercial contiguous here, and a scaled back soccer. I don't know whether you could fit 4 or 5 or 6 soccer fields in here, but I that's a lot in itself, 4 or 5 soccer fields over here in the corner. And that would be contiguous to the Union Valley Park and with the Aqua Center that's being proposed up here. The other thing that I'm concerned with is that all of a sudden it's become fashionable for us to allow the applicant to bypass some of the normal procedures of planning and development. I know that this applicant didn't go through the didn't take advantage of the pre-application process, and I'm a little concerned with us supporting that sort of thing. I think there is a project here. And if we don't agree with the planning and development process, then I think we need to look at that and maybe change that. But as long as we do have this process, I would have liked to have heard from traffic on what they think about this single access coming off of Hummel Drive. You know, if we have 12 soccer fields up here, this is really going to become a regional soccer field. Like you say, you're going to be having, how are people going to get into this? I mean, they go from Clark Avenue down to the frontage road, back to Foster, up Hummel, some of this sort of thing, or Santa Maria Way down to Foster to Hummel. I'm just not sure, and I'm just not sure there's that accessibility over there. So I think there is a project here. I certainly can appreciate the neighbor saying that, geez, we want this to stay open space forever. That ain't going to happen. Not in the Santa Maria Valley, not with the growth that we have in Santa Maria Valley. Something's going to happen on this. I'm real pleased to see that a quality developer like Lene Hunter has this piece of property, and not somebody from Orange County that's just going to jam something down our throat and threaten to take us to court if we, don't accept what they want us to do and this sort of thing. We do have an opportunity here, but this isn't the project that I'd like to go forward, and I can't support going forward with this one, but I really think there is a project that could go forward, and I think there's a project that staff could support in here. But for me, it's just not this, and I don't mean to be criticizing mom and apple pie and soccer players, but it's real intense. So those are my comments.
I think the estimate of 1,000 kids is a little high. Being out on the field all the time, I see about 8 fields over here. When there's a game going on, 50% of the parents show up. Not all the parents. They show up, and so there's say 26 kids, 2 teams, 13 and 13, 26, and then say 12 parents up there. I'm at the game sometimes from 9 o'clock till about 6, and maybe there's half of the parents attending the games. And I would see could I have the, I see what would happen, and while we show 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 fields, I see that you might end up with maybe 7 or 8 fields. This might end up being a parking lot. I think what you're going to find out is that you're going to need transitional parking for the games, and one of these fields might just have to end up being parking. I don't know if you would put it over here or here, but you'll end up probably when this whole thing is completed with 8 fields. You're going to need more space in between, because as the games get started and say you make these fields, people come out and bring their chairs. But as this thing gets more interest, probably you'll put back-to-back bleachers, one set of bleachers facing that way and one facing this way, the short portable bleachers. And so you need space in between for people to get through back and forth. So I don't see 1,000 people here at all. And there would be difficulty in if you had 1,000 people in trying to get them and parking these cars and all that. That just won't happen. And as far as this here, I think this is the first look at it based on a suggestion by comprehensive planning, but that could all change. If you're looking at DR4 here, I don't know why this has to be DR20, could be DR12 for all that. And I agree, there could probably be a buffer in there so that these homes here, high-quality homes, would not be looking into this apartment complex here. And the same thing on this side here. I agree with that. And this makeup here could change. So this is just the first look, and I'm sure there's going to be 5 or 6 looks at this thing. It's just whether do we go forward with it or not. And I think that, as you indicated, that it's a big piece of land. At some point, somebody is going to do something. There's nothing wrong with looking at it now. We'll make a lot of decisions when the EIR gets made, and there'll be probably 5 or 6 plans. As I recall, when the project over on Highway 154 came out, and initially it came out with I think 170 some units. It went down to 79. It came down to 15 and 5 condos, and now they're trying to do a shift and put 44 units in there. So the picture changes continually. It's a very moving thing until the final map goes in. And I see this happening here. I see that there are going to be, because of the complaints, because people don't want to lose their views and those type of things, although we don't protect views. You know, as I was told when I had a house and I looked at this beautiful view, said, well, if you like it, you can buy it. Well, no, that's silly. I can't afford to buy it. But you still have some impact on your comments here, and I think all that's going to be reflected in an EIR, and I think I don't see any problem in going forward. Maybe after the EIR and everything comes on, maybe it's that it's not feasible to develop this at all. So something is going to come through. Commissioner Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel like we're going through conceptual review without a project. And for me, I would like to see a project so that we could do conceptual review. Here it's just, I think, as Ms. Tomorrow indicated, that it's just bubbles that we're sort of pushing around on the screen. But I think it's, I'm sorry that we didn't have a project so that people could respond to the project rather than just this concept. Great concept, but I think that's what we have conceptual review for. So I would really like to see the applicant come in. You're going to get some comments from the commissioners, and you're working with the community, obviously. So I think you need to go the regular process. I don't know how you do an EIR without a project. It's kind of nebulous for me. I guess I'm too new to the game that I don't really understand how you would do that. I support soccer fields. I'm not sure I support 10 of them. I think there needs to be some, as the Orchid Community Plan indicated, some passive recreational use here. I see potential with housing. I think it's a good idea to put the areas that you've suggested into the housing element EIR to see what comes out of it. But I would really like the applicant to go forward with the project, and then we can respond to it. But without that, I'm sort of a handicap knowing what to do.
Thank you. Commissioner Montgomery.
I'd like to approach it somewhat differently. However, I do feel there is a project here. I agree with Commissioner Boyson, and I sense that perhaps Commissioner Brown feels there could be a project here as well. I'd like to come back to something that's troubled me from the time I got involved with the Planning Commission and the process and community plans. This community plan did take about 10 years to get to a final resolution, 9 years ago. Los Alamos, a few months ago, a proposal came forward for an amendment to the community plan of Los Alamos that would increase the residential area, expand the urban limits, add about 30% to the housing stock as compared to what was there. And Supervisor Firestone immediately suggested that there be an advisory committee that looked into the community plan amendments that would be required. I don't know whether, other than in the Old Orchid area, there is an ongoing advisory committee, but it's something that should be considered, because I consider a community plan is part of the general plan. This is state mandated, goes through a tremendous process. People have a right to rely on community plans. and go through, but there needs to be a process to bring them up to date. Because things do change, as many people have said here today. If you look strictly at the community plan, it'd be very hard to find intense, active recreation as is being proposed here as fitting into the existing community plan. I think I sort of favor my colleagues' sort of early feel that maybe less would be more. It would also have more support within this immediate community. On the housing side, the community plan does anticipate that the corners that are being considered residential are appropriately to be considered residential, but doesn't give a lot of guidance as to the density, other than Ag 40, which would give you one house in the whole area. So clearly a community plan update would be required, and I think you're correct. You have to start the community plan amendment process. I just would like to have you give some thought as to whether you want to recommend to the supervisor in the district something similar to what Supervisor Firestone did, because I think that would help us be some guidance from the supervisor who is the most responsible. Certainly knows the area well. She happens to live in Orchid. I think that would help me. I think that I would like to agree with, I think, the remarks of Commissioner Brown and Commissioner Boyson that I'd like to see a hard project, and I would not favor commercial, as with Commissioner Boyson. I liked George Pierce's ideas of a senior center and a library or a resource center and enough units to satisfy our moral requirements for providing housing. I don't see anything inconsistent with having the housing element go forward on DR20. There's no way this applicant would be looking for that density. And I'll remind people the way the law works. The housing element is totally different. That satisfies the state mandate that says you have to rezone 62 acres. It doesn't to a particular density, and they don't have a 16. It's either 20 or nothing in order to meet the low and very low requirements. There's absolutely no requirement that when that takes place, that an applicant has to go in with that. So it's sort of a win-win for the community if you handle it right. You get the credit for fulfilling your housing mandate, at least as far as the current element's concerned, and you have the chance to look at a real project later.
Commissioner Cooney.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I came to this project determined to support both you and Commissioner Boyson as the commissioners from the district, and lo and behold, you didn't agree on something, so now I'm in a quandary. But I think that all we're talking about is which path to take here. I don't think any is going to go off by itself. They're all going to come back to the same place, which is eventually back to us for review of a more specific project. I certainly hope, including soccer fields. The need has been demonstrated. I think it's a wonderful goal, but regardless of what ends up being built on this site, we need to do a lot more planning than we've been able to do up to this point. So I guess I would support or prefer staff's first recommendation, which does not imply that the commission supports the actual project and the plan amendment. And what we're allowing it to do is to go forward with environmental review. And so it continues to be a work in progress. And as it goes through the environmental review, perhaps the project changes and gets better. And the next time we see it, we're going to be in a much better place to give specific responses. So I think that it would be a mistake to initiate a general plan amendment at this time. I'm not prepared to do that, but I'm certainly willing to sign on to including it within the housing element implementation.
Commissioner Boyson.
Well, and and I think inclusion of it in the housing element including it in that, it has already been done when we selected or when we authorized this site to be considered within the environmental review process. And I would agree with that with Commissioner Cooney, but I think as far as the overall direction, I think both for staff and the applicant's benefits, that it is important that, you know, before we allow an initiation of a specific environmental review of the entire project, that we come back with a project that has a chance. I just don't see 12 soccer fields as having a chance to make the cut as on a and I, you know, I think it's just we would not be doing good planning to allow this particular project to go forward. But you know, I don't think we're that far away. I do think that we do have something. So
Thank you. Ms. Hunter, would you like to comment? Or Mr. Moore?
Thank you so much, Chairman Valencia. I think a couple of things really need to come out. Number one, when I submitted the first application for the zone change, I'd like to tell you what that was. It was DR8 and DR9. And I was asked by comprehensive planning to increase that to DR20. Never, ever did I think that this site will ever be built out to DR20. From a design standpoint, it doesn't even work. That may be the number the state gives you, as they give all the other communities, but it's not realistic unless you can go up. This is not a community that you go up. So I feel like I've really been caught at a disadvantage, because what happened was I submitted an application in good faith. I submitted it at DR8 and DR9, and then the staff said, well, why don't you throw in some commercial? And I said, well, yeah, it's maybe okay. I never thought any of this was cut in stone, ever. And I knew that the DR20 would help them if it were to be rezoned. I'm never going to build it at that, but it helps the county achieve the numbers. And I felt like I was being a team player in doing that. And I feel like I've taken a lot of heat because of it. And I feel like that's unfair. And I feel like if I'm willing to go forward and say, I can bring you a project that may incorporate some of the things that Commissioner Boyson has just suggested, which I'm absolutely in favor of. Maybe we need to look at some single family along here. I volunteered a 40-foot buffer. All those stars there, I jumped out and said, look, I think this needs to be a landscape buffer. 40 feet, that's a lot of feet. And so it's very important to me that I create a really good project for the community. But I don't think by going into the housing element maze is what really will end up being a good project for this community. Someday we'll come out of that maze. I understand there's a lawsuit that's going to be filed against it. But someday we'll come out of that maze, and at that point, I certainly will have the opportunity to submit another project. But I can tell you, it probably won't include the soccer fields. And maybe 12 is too many. I don't know. Those are the things I'm willing to spend the money on, my own hard-earned dollars, to find out those answers so I can come back to you with a plan. And this has been a really awkward process because I was never invited to go to a pre-application process. I would have been happy to do that. I was told that I had to go to you first. So that's what we did, and I've spent a huge amount of money to get here on engineering, on consultants, on all kinds of things. And so all I'm asking from you is just the right to spend my dollars to bring you a project that I can tell you is my best effort, and that can, from then, it can get massaged by the commissioners, the community, everyone. But the only reason I suggested DR20 was because comp planning suggested it to me. I'm not shooting at them. It was probably the right thing for them to do. But it wasn't my original submission. You can check in your file. Correct, Adam? It wasn't. Here's a copy of it. So I feel like I'm really getting caught sort of in a bad situation when all I'm asking for is, let me bring you a project that really is a credit to this community. And maybe it's 5 soccer fields, maybe it's 6. I don't know the number. And maybe there's more single family in here. And probably the commercial goes away. And I have to tell you, does someone have a pointer here? I have one more thing I do need to say. As you can tell, I'm a little fired up. Aha, I got one that works. No one ever asked me what this is right here. That little is a little commercial piece. You can see it's separated from this, and it's separated from this. And nobody ever asked me what that is, and it's actually been kind of interesting, because I'll be happy to tell you what it is. That is the site right there that I promised myself, if we were able to get a project that works for the community, I would donate that to the library. And I've already met with Francisco Pinelli to discuss that with him. I met with him about 6-8 weeks ago. I said I wasn't going to say it publicly because I wanted it to be something nice that I could come back and, in addition to doing some kind of soccer fields, could also leave a legacy for my grandchildren who are big library supporters. They're 2 years old and 4 years old. They go to the library all the time. That I could at least get Orcutt started with a site for a library, because I know it isn't going to happen otherwise. I don't think the county can find the dollars. They're in a storefront down there on Clark Avenue. So my only request is, let me go through the normal process. Let me bring you a project that doesn't have DR20 on it, because I don't want it anyway. But I don't know how to get there, so you got to help me. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam, could you give us some response?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, just a point of clarification. The project was submitted to the county the end of last year, and we had really just started to look at it, I believe, in November and more in December. And it was at that time as well, in November, that your commission was reviewing the sites. And this one was one of them. And this commission asked the applicant if she would be willing to consider increasing the density. Lane did submit, and actually it was in my PowerPoint presentation the first go around in March, because this submittal was handed to me literally at that hearing just to include the DR zoning in it. My original PowerPoint included a DR 8 in the southeast and a DR9 in the northeast. So when we went and we reviewed this project for consistency with the plan, it wasn't a pre-app, it was a general plan amendment and rezone application. And so we had to look at it for the merits of the project, and we looked at the history behind the Orcutt Community Plan, how the Orcutt Community Plan EIR looked at 3 different options for this site. They included a higher density and a lower density residential component and a commercial component and some of the alternatives. But ultimately, when the OCP was adopted in '97, the zoning remained in ag, and the previous residential land use designation of PD 3.3 was redesignated to A1. Well, in our minds as staff, that showed a pretty clear intent of the direction. I mean, they even looked at different alternatives, very similar to this one, in the EIR process. So, given that we had a general plan amendment and a rezone project of this nature in front of us, and our incomplete deadlines and things, we said at this time we couldn't recommend approval of this initiation, given the history of the site. However, that the housing element process had already been looking at this site as something else, a possible opportunity site. That's why in our incomplete letter we recommended, we said that we couldn't at this time support this particular project. However, we would even encourage them to work with the housing element team, because it was already being looked at and was already designated by your commission to be one of the potential housing element sites. So I think that's where a lot of the frustration is coming from. And now, because we're kind of talking about going back down in density. General plan amendments and rezones can be initiated at the staff level. in certain instances. In this instance, staff was not comfortable making that call to put forth a general plan amendment and a rezone. That's why we brought it to the commission, and we didn't close the door or bring it forward for summary denial or anything of that nature. So that's essentially what we're asking for now is direction from the commission as to.
It seems like this housing element has become a housing elephant. It seems like it's affecting a lot of, this, I think it's SB Senate Bill 1866, which mandated 17,500 type homes, and SB Can determined that 65%, 11,000 of those homes would be built up here in the North County, and now they're scrambling to try to meet that due date of 2008, and if not, there'll be sanctions and whatever. So things are getting, and I can understand if comprehensive planning, if I had brought a project and comprehensive said, put in 20 units in there, we'll help you get your project through, I would do that. But it wasn't initially, as the applicant says, that maybe we just, rather than take any action, need to continue this item and allow the applicant to submit another plan to us. Commissioner Montgomery.
I used to be active in healthcare products companies, and my greatest pride and joy were the sales forces, and hardest lesson to teach a salesman is when you've made a sale, quit. I think the applicant had made a sale before she came up to rebut what she thought she was hearing from the commission. What I thought she was hearing from the commission was all positive. It said, let the housing element go forward, which was the first recommendation, and it said, we think there's a project here. I don't know what changed you in the last 15 minutes. I can understand sitting through one of these things and being as highly motivated a person as you are, you can get upset. But I think staff did an excellent job. They were responding as they were requested. It's the responsibility of the Planning Commission, not P&D staff, and they were carrying out what they thought were our wishes and the wishes of the Board of Supervisors. I think this is a win-win. I don't think you lost today, but let's cool it. You made a sale that people feel there's a project here if you bring it forward, and I wouldn't unscramble the eggs. I think staff did the right thing. You're in the housing element. Let that go forward. It's totally independent of a project you come forward with. So I'm ready for.
Thank you. I think it's a timing thing. Mr. Boyson?
I just wanted to add one thing, and basically I was going to say something similar to what Commissioner Montgomery said. I don't think anybody's saying that, we don't agree. The DR20 I don't even think is a question. That's going to go forward as part of the housing element, and I think when that housing element does come forward, they're probably not going to come up with 15 usable acres for the DR20 on this particular piece of property because of all the constraints that they're going to come up with. My main concern is to indicate that I would support the initiation of project with this intent of a recreational facility on this particular piece of property in this in this neighborhood environment. So I agree with Commissioner Montgomery. I think we've got a project here, and I think Commissioner, our chair, has made a pretty good suggestion that maybe we continue this for 90 days or 60 days, whatever it takes, and let's come back with some sort of a revised project as far as, look, this is what we're really kind of thinking as far as how it would lay out, so we give the neighborhood some comfort and respect the community, not just necessarily the community plan.
Thank you. Commissioner Bowman, Mr. Bowman, when could we bring this, when could the applicant come back? 60 days, 90 days? $60 days? Could you come back in 60 days? Okay. Do we have any? Would you have time to evaluate it? Mr. Brush, are you going to jump in on this? All right, we'll take a 30-second breather. We'll take a 2-minute break here while they work this out. Adam, do you have a recommendation? I have something that Deputy Director has passed on to me verbally. The recommendation is that the applicant come in with a pre-app and a conceptual review.
Chairman Valencia, it's just another option that your commission could consider. It sounds like you all think that there is a project here and you'd want to consider that project, and the comment was made that we haven't gone through a pre-app process. You could decline to initiate this particular application and direct the applicant to apply for a pre-application, go through that process, which includes conceptual review before the commission, and then you would have a project before you that you could comment on. That's just another
All right.
potential option.
Why don't we do that? And what would be
And
the
it-
action, Council? Would we just not take any action on the recommendation today?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, first I'd like to request of the applicant whether that's an acceptable process for them.
Thank you very much, Commissioners. You've given us a lot of food for thought in some of the ideas for the development of the site and concept plans. We would be willing to come back in through a pre-app process with the idea of bringing all those ideas forward to you. If we come back, the only caveat to that, if we come back with the conceptual review at the Planning Commission, will an option be in that to allow for initiation of the general plan change and rezone and start us on that way? If it's just conceptual review again, I think we pretty much conceptually reviewed this already. And so I don't know if we want to bring everybody back out again to
I don't think
debate
the
the
people
issue.
know what kind of a project you have. You
I
know,
know.
what you're showing now
So-
is DR20 and everybody's
Yeah.
upset about it.
So what I'd like, if we'll be willing and very much able to work with staff on an alternate plan and bring that back forward to the Planning Commission in 60, 80 days, whatever, with the ultimate goal on our side, hopefully, to initiate a process.
what you would like to see in there.
Yes, yes, exactly. Thank you.
Yes, just a minute.
Chair
Go ahead.
Valencia, another option would be just to continue it and ask the applicant to come back with a new proposal. As
All
you
right, well, that's
discussed
the best
before.
one.
And perhaps,
Yeah.
you
Here,
have
here.
specifics that you are looking for,
All right.
like,
All
for
right.
example, reduced
Right.
density, or example, reduced soccer fields,
Okay.
whatever it is, but you could just do it in that fashion as
Okay.
well. Then that
Just
way,
continue it.
you can initiate
Okay.
it in 2 months or 3 months if you choose to, or you can decline to if you still don't like that.
All right.
That's my preference.
Thank you
That
very
would
much.
be, we're there, yes.
Commissioner Boyson? Fine. Commissioner Montgomery?
Yeah, I think we've had our conceptual review. And just to repeat, I think that you're going to have a very difficult time overcoming the very clear words of the community plan on the passive recreational use. And you have a much more open path on residential within the plan. So I'd favor coming forward. I favor this approach.
All right, thank you very much. This is a 4th district item, so I'm going to make a motion that we just continue this item for 60 days.
To a specific date?
To a
Is
specific
that
date.
date
Do we have a date?
selected?
Which date?
Chairman Valencia, Commissioners, that would be July 12th, and that would fill your agenda. You currently have 4 hours
All
on
right.
that agenda, so that would make this a 6 or 7 hour day.
All right. Commissioner Boyson, did you have
I'll
some-
second that.
Oh, thank you. All right. Any further discussion? All right, let's have Ms. Mendoza.
Commissioner Boyson?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Cooney?
Aye.
Commissioner Montgomery?
Aye.
Commissioner Valencia?
Aye.
Vote carries 5-0.
All right, and with that, the Planning Commission has completed its work today. Thank you very much for coming in and participating.